Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to declare a powerful truth. God has a way out of your impossible situation. You may be sitting here right now facing challenges so overwhelming that you cannot see a way forward. You may feel trapped, surrounded by problems, or overwhelmed by circumstances. But I want to remind you today that in the midst of all this, God has already prepared your way out. Life can sometimes seem overwhelming, especially when we find ourselves trapped in situations that appear impossible to navigate. The weight of our problems, the intensity of our struggles, and the uncertainty of our future can make us question whether there is any way out. But the truth remains. God has already prepared a way out of your impossible situation. The key to finding this way out begins with understanding that you are not here by chance. Your life is not a random sequence of events. You are a purposeful creation, and the challenges you face are part of the journey towards fulfilling your divine destiny. When you begin to see your life as part of a larger intentional design, you begin to understand that the difficulties you encounter are not meant to break you, but to build you. It's easy to fall into despair and to feel as though you are lost in the chaos of life. But when you recognize that God has a specific plan for you, it becomes easier to face each challenge with hope, knowing that it is part of the greater story He is writing in your life. Even the hardest seasons are shaping you into who you were created to be. Your pain, your frustrations, and your doubts are not the end of your story. They are stepping stones that lead to something greater. Often we focus so much on the obstacles before us that we forget about the power and potential that lies within us. Each of us has been given gifts, talents, and unique qualities that have been placed within us by God. The struggles you face are not meant to overshadow these gifts, but rather to draw them out. They are refining and sharpening you, preparing you for the greater purpose that God has for your life. When you can shift your perspective to understand that you are not defined by your circumstances, but by your divine calling, you will begin to see each challenge as an opportunity to grow and move closer to the person God has called you to be. But it's not just about recognizing that God has a purpose for your life. It's also about realizing that God has already made a way for you to overcome your challenges. Sometimes we believe that our situations are too difficult, too impossible for God to handle. We become overwhelmed by the weight of our problems and forget that God is the creator of all things, the one who holds the universe in His hands. There is no situation too great for God to handle. There is no problem so complex that He cannot provide a solution. In fact, your current struggles may be the very thing that prepares you for the breakthrough God has in store for you. When we begin to walk in the awareness of our divine purpose, we no longer see our struggles as random or meaningless. Instead, we start to understand that they are part of a much bigger picture. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of hardship is an opportunity for growth. Even in our darkest times, God is working behind the scenes, preparing us for the blessings that are yet to come. You may not see the way out right now, but trust that God is already at work, orchestrating the events of your life in ways that will ultimately lead you to freedom and victory. God's plan for your life is bigger than any obstacle you face. The key is to remain faithful, to trust in His process, and to keep moving forward even when the road seems uncertain. Your life is not defined by the struggles you face, but by the purpose God has placed within you. And when you begin to embrace this purpose, you'll begin to see how every challenge is connected to a greater plan, leading you to the fulfillment of your destiny. So I urge you today to recognize the divine purpose in your life. Understand that you are not here by mistake. Your challenges are not here to defeat you, but to prepare you. The way out of your impossible situation may not be immediately clear, but trust that God has already paved the path, and it is up to you to walk in faith, knowing that with every step you are getting closer to the person you were destined to be. You are not alone, and there is always a way forward with God. When we are confronted with what seems like an impossible situation, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, helpless, and even hopeless. The obstacles in front of us can appear insurmountable, and in these moments, we often look within ourselves for the strength and solutions we need to overcome them. But the truth is, when facing life's greatest challenges, Our faith cannot be placed in our own limited strength. It must be rooted in God's infinite ability to do the impossible. Faith is not about trusting in what we can see, touch, or control. It is about trusting in a God who has the power to move mountains. Faith is the bridge that connects us to God's miraculous power, enabling us to tap into solutions that go beyond our understanding and capabilities. There are moments in life when we reach the end of ourselves, when we have tried everything, and still there seems to be no way out. It is in these moments that faith becomes our greatest weapon. Faith is not a denial of the reality of your situation, but a declaration that God is bigger than any problem you face. It is the assurance that even when you can't see a way, God is already working on your behalf to make a way. In the face of impossibility, it's easy to become discouraged. Our natural instincts lead us to focus on what's in front of us, what we can see and understand with our own minds. But God's ability is not confined to what we can comprehend. He is not bound by time, by space, or by human limitations. He operates on a different level altogether. When you place your faith in God, you're acknowledging that He has the power to move beyond the natural and into the supernatural. Faith moves mountains. Jesus Himself said in Matthew 17:20 that if we have faith as small as a mustard seed, we can say to a mountain, "Move from here to there," and it will move. This passage illustrates the immense power of faith, showing that even a small amount of genuine faith can unlock incredible possibilities. What appears immovable to the human eye becomes subject to the will of God when you place your trust in Him. Think about the miracles in Scripture: the parting of the Red Sea, the healing of the sick, the raising of the dead, the feeding of the 5,000 with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. These are not stories of human ingenuity or strength. They are testimonies of God's limitless ability to provide, to heal, and to deliver. The power of God's ability is not restricted to the pages of the Bible. It is still at work today, in your life and in my life. When you face an impossible situation, it is not your power, wisdom, or understanding that will make a way. It is God's power working through your faith. It is essential to remember that our faith is not in our ability to solve the problem, but in God's ability to solve it in ways that are beyond our comprehension. God is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that we ask or think. When we focus on our own strength, we limit the scope of the possible. But when we place our faith in God's infinite ability, we open ourselves to His miraculous solutions that transcend the natural realm. This is the essence of true faith: to trust that God's ability is greater than your circumstances, and that He will provide a way even when you can't see how. In times of struggle, you may not always know how God will deliver you, and it may not always look the way you expect. But that is why faith is so powerful. It is a trust that goes beyond what we see. Faith unlocks the unseen solutions, opening doors to opportunities, resources, and breakthroughs that are beyond human comprehension. When you face what seems like an impossible situation, remember this: your faith is not in what you can do, but in what God can do. Trust in His ability to move mountains, to provide in ways you can't imagine, and to bring you through the storm. Faith is the key that unlocks the door to the impossible, and when you place your faith in God, you position yourself for a miracle. In our fast-paced world, we are often conditioned to expect instant results. We live in a culture that values quick fixes and immediate answers. When we encounter challenges, we want solutions to appear right away. But God's ways are not our ways, and His timing is not like our timing. God's timing is perfect, and it is always right, even when it doesn't align with our own sense of urgency. When faced with difficult situations, it's natural to want immediate relief. We may pray for God to act quickly, hoping that our problems will be resolved in an instant. However, what we often fail to realize is that God's timing is intricately designed, not only for the situation at hand, but for the purposes He is fulfilling in our lives. God is not bound by time the way we are. He exists outside of time, and therefore He knows exactly when to intervene in our lives for the greatest good. His timing is purposeful, and it's always aligned with His divine plan for us. Many of us have been in situations where we felt like time was running out, when we thought that if God didn't act quickly, things would spiral out of control. But the truth is, God is never late, and He is never early. He is always right on time. His timing may not always match our expectations, but it will always work out for our ultimate benefit. There are times when God allows us to experience delays, not because He is indifferent to our suffering, but because He is preparing us for something greater. Sometimes we must go through a process of growth, patience, and perseverance before we are ready to receive the breakthrough He has planned for us. Think about the story of Lazarus in the Bible. When Lazarus fell ill, his sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus, asking Him to come and heal their brother. But Jesus didn't rush to Lazarus' side. In fact, He waited for several days before going to them. And by the time He arrived, Lazarus had died. In that moment, it must have seemed like the situation was beyond hope. Mary and Martha were heartbroken, and they questioned Jesus, saying, "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." Yet Jesus' delay wasn't a sign of indifference. It was a part of His divine plan. When Jesus finally arrived, He raised Lazarus from the dead, showing everyone the power of God's timing and His ability to turn an impossible situation into a miraculous testimony. If Jesus had acted sooner, the miracle would not have had the same impact. Similarly, in our own lives, we may not understand why things are taking longer than we expected, but we can trust that God is orchestrating every detail of our lives to bring about the best possible outcome. Even in the darkest moments, God is at work behind the scenes, aligning people, events, and circumstances to bring forth His perfect will for us. His timing ensures that everything will fall into place at just the right moment. Consider the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. Joseph received a dream from God at a young age that he would one day be in a position of authority. But instead of seeing that dream fulfilled immediately, he went through years of betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. There were times when Joseph might have wondered if his dream would ever come true. But when the time was right, God elevated him to the position of second in command in Egypt, saving not only his family, but an entire nation from famine. God's delay was part of the process of preparing Joseph for his destiny. If he had been elevated too soon, he may not have had the wisdom or character to handle the position. God knew that Joseph needed to go through certain experiences in order to be fully prepared for what was ahead. We may not always understand why things are happening the way they are, or why they are taking longer than we anticipated, but we can rest assured that God is never caught off guard. He is never surprised by the delays, the detours, or the difficulties we face. Every moment is a part of His divine plan, and He is working everything out for our good. Trust in God's timing, because it is always perfect. When things seem bleak and hope feels distant, remember that God is orchestrating your breakthrough at exactly the right moment. And when it comes, it will be worth the wait. So the next time you find yourself in the midst of a difficult situation and feel like time is running out, remind yourself that God is in control of the clock. Trust His timing, because He knows what you need and when you need it. Even when you can't see the way forward, God is already preparing your breakthrough. And when the time is right, He will bring it to pass. In times of struggle, it's easy to think that all we need to do is wait for our circumstances to change. We may find ourselves sitting idly, hoping that eventually things will get better on their own. But waiting alone is not enough. It's not enough just to passively endure a difficult season, hoping for a breakthrough. The real power lies in actively trusting and persevering through the trial, with a heart that remains steadfast and faithful, even in the most challenging moments. God uses the trials and hardships we face as tools to refine our character. We often want to escape pain and difficulty, but it is precisely in the moments of struggle that God shapes us into the people we are meant to be. Perseverance and patience are not just passive experiences. They are active choices that demonstrate our trust in God's plan, even when we cannot see the end result. Consider the example of an athlete training for a race. It's not enough for them to simply show up at the starting line and hope for the best. They must endure long hours of grueling practice, pushing their bodies beyond their limits and persevering through the pain. This process builds their endurance and strengthens their resolve. In the same way, God allows us to go through trials and difficulties to build our spiritual endurance. It's not about avoiding challenges. It's about allowing those challenges to shape us into people who can endure with faith, patience, and perseverance. Patience is a fruit of the Spirit, and it is developed through the experiences we face. It's easy to be patient when everything is going well, but true patience is forged in the fire of difficulty. It is in the waiting that our faith is tested and refined. It's in the moments when we feel like giving up, when we can't see a way forward, that our patience grows. God uses these moments to teach us the valuable lessons of endurance, trust, and reliance on Him. James 1:4 reminds us, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This verse shows us that trials are not just setbacks. They are opportunities for growth. When we persevere through trials with faith, we become more complete, more mature, and more equipped for the future God has for us. Perseverance is also about maintaining hope and staying faithful, even when the road ahead is unclear. It's easy to get discouraged when we don't see immediate results or when we encounter more obstacles along the way. But the key is to keep moving forward, trusting that God is at work behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. Victory doesn't always come immediately. Sometimes it is the journey of perseverance itself that prepares us for what's ahead. The Bible provides countless examples of individuals who persevered through difficult situations and emerged victorious. Consider the story of Job. Job faced unimaginable suffering. He lost his wealth, his health, and his family, but he never gave up on God. He struggled, he questioned, but he never abandoned his faith. Through his perseverance, Job's character was refined, and in the end, God restored everything to him and more. Job's story is a powerful reminder that God does not waste our suffering. He uses it to build our character and to prepare us for greater blessings. Similarly, the Apostle Paul wrote about his own struggles in 2 Corinthians 12:9, where he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul's perseverance through hardship brought him closer to Christ and strengthened his faith. The trials he faced were not in vain. They were part of God's plan to refine and perfect him. We must understand that perseverance and patience are not simply about enduring hardships without complaint. It is about actively trusting God in the process, knowing that He is using the challenges we face to refine our hearts, deepen our faith, and prepare us for the victories ahead. As we persevere, we grow in endurance, and our character is molded to reflect the image of Christ. God's purpose in allowing us to go through trials is not to cause harm, but to build within us the qualities necessary for our growth and success. Perseverance builds strength, and patience deepens our relationship with God. The road to victory is not always easy, but it is through the trials and the perseverance that we become the people God has called us to be. So the next time you find yourself in a difficult situation, don't just wait passively for it to pass. Trust, persevere, and allow God to refine you through the process. Victory is not found in the absence of struggle, but in the strength and patience we develop as we walk through it with God. When we find ourselves in difficult situations, it's easy to view them as obstacles or burdens to be avoided. The natural instinct is to escape the pain, discomfort, and uncertainty that adversity often brings. But what if we began to see these challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for transformation? What if we realized that the very trials we dread are the tools that God uses to shape us into the people we were always destined to become? Adversity is not simply a test of our endurance or our patience. It is an integral part of our spiritual development. God does not allow hardship to break us. He allows it to build us. The trials we face today are shaping us into the people we need to be for the future He has planned for us. It is in the fire of adversity that our true character is revealed and refined, and we are brought closer to the person God created us to be. Take, for instance, the process of refining gold. Gold, when it is first mined, is often full of impurities. It is not until it is placed in the fire that these impurities can be burned away, leaving behind the pure, valuable gold. In the same way, the challenges we face are the fire that purifies us. God allows us to go through difficulties not to destroy us, but to purify and refine us, removing the things that hinder us from becoming who we were meant to be. The Apostle Paul understood this concept well when he wrote in Romans 5:03, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope." Paul saw suffering not as a defeat, but as a necessary part of the process of transformation. It is through suffering that perseverance is developed, and through perseverance our character is shaped. This transformation doesn't just prepare us for what lies ahead, it also deepens our relationship with God. As we endure hardship and grow in faith, we gain a deeper understanding of His power, His faithfulness, and His love. Adversity teaches us lessons that we could never learn in times of comfort. It is when we are stretched beyond our limits that we discover just how strong we really are, and more importantly, how much stronger we become when we rely on God's strength. We may think we know what we are capable of, but it is through trials that God shows us the depths of His power, working in and through us. When we face challenges, we have the opportunity to experience God's provision in a way that we would never fully understand if everything was always smooth sailing. Through adversity, we grow in strength, faith, and resilience. One of the most powerful examples of transformation through adversity can be found in the life of Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused of a crime, and thrown into prison. Yet through all of this, God was at work, shaping Joseph into the leader he was destined to become. In the midst of his trials, Joseph remained faithful, trusting that God had a purpose for his life, even when the road seemed bleak and uncertain. Joseph's adversity didn't break him. It transformed him. By the time he was elevated to a position of power in Egypt, he had gained wisdom, humility, and a deep understanding of God's sovereignty. His trials had shaped him into the man who would save not only his family, but an entire nation from famine. God allows adversity to bring forth growth, not just in our character, but in our understanding of His power and presence. It is easy to see God's hand in our lives when everything is going well, but it is often in the trials that we experience His power most profoundly. When we are at our lowest, that is when we often encounter God in ways that are life-changing. Adversity has a way of bringing us to the end of ourselves so that we are forced to rely fully on God. And it is in these moments that we witness His strength and provision in ways we never could have imagined. The process of transformation through adversity is not always easy or quick. It requires patience, trust, and a willingness to be shaped by the trials we face. But know this, God does not waste our suffering. Every difficulty we endure is a chance to grow, to become more like Christ, and to prepare for the blessings that He has in store for us. Your adversity today is shaping your tomorrow. The struggles you are facing are not in vain. They are part of God's plan to refine you, strengthen you, and equip you for what lies ahead. So, when you find yourself in the midst of adversity, don't despair. Instead, remember that God is using these very challenges to transform you. Your current trial is not your destination. It is part of the journey that will lead you to greater strength, greater faith, and a deeper understanding of God's power. Embrace the process of transformation because God is at work in you, shaping you into the person you were always meant to be. When faced with an impossible situation, it's tempting to sit back and wait for a miraculous solution to fall from the sky. We often hope that God will simply swoop in and remove the obstacles in our path, delivering us from our struggles without us having to take any action. But the truth is, God's way out of your impossible situation will require action on your part. It is not enough to simply wait passively for a miracle to happen. You must align your actions with God's will and step out in obedience, even when it doesn't make sense to you. Obedience to God is the key to unlocking His deliverance in our lives. It is through obeying His instructions, even when they seem illogical or challenging, that we position ourselves to experience His power at work in our circumstances. Obedience is not just about following a set of rules or instructions. It is about trusting that God knows what is best for us, even when we cannot see the bigger picture. Consider the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. They had just been freed from slavery in Egypt, and now they found themselves standing at the edge of the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army closing in behind them. It seemed like a hopeless situation, but God didn't just part the waters immediately. He told Moses to raise his staff and stretch it out over the sea. The way out of their impossible situation required action, obedience to God's direction. Even when it didn't make sense, why would God ask them to do something so simple when the waters were so vast and the enemy so near? Because he wanted them to trust in his direction, even when the solution seemed improbable. When Moses obeyed, the waters parted, and the Israelites were able to walk through on dry ground. God's deliverance came through their obedience to his command. In our own lives, God often asks us to take steps of faith that may seem counterintuitive or challenging. We may not understand why God is directing us to do something that seems impossible, but obedience is the pathway to his provision and deliverance. Think of the times in Scripture when God asked his people to take seemingly insignificant actions that led to profound miracles. When God instructed Joshua to march around the walls of Jericho 7 times, it seemed absurd, but it was through their obedience to God's strange instructions that the walls of Jericho came crashing down. The same principle applies to us today. God's way out of your impossible situation may not look the way you expect. Sometimes he will ask you to take bold, courageous steps of obedience, even when you don't fully understand how they will lead to your breakthrough. It may require you to step into unknown territory, to let go of something that feels safe, or to trust him in a way that feels uncomfortable. But it is through these acts of obedience that God will show his power in ways you never imagined. Obedience is not always easy. It often requires us to trust God in the face of uncertainty, to surrender our own understanding and rely completely on his wisdom. God's directions may not always align with our logic, but his ways are higher than our ways. The act of obedience is not about understanding the full picture, but about trusting that God knows what he's doing and that he will lead us to the right place at the right time. The Bible reminds us in Proverbs 3:5-6, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." When we trust God with all our hearts and obey his directions, even when we don't understand them, he will lead us through the impossible situation and into victory. Obedience also requires patience and persistence. Often, God's instructions may not lead to an immediate result, but as we continue to obey him step by step, we begin to see the fruit of our obedience unfold. The process may not be instant, but each step of obedience is a step closer to God's deliverance. It is the consistency of following God's directions that leads us to the breakthrough we're praying for. So, when you find yourself in the midst of an impossible situation, ask yourself, what is God asking me to do? It may not always make sense, and it may require stepping out in faith, but remember this: your deliverance is tied to your obedience. Don't just wait for a miracle. Actively participate in God's plan by obeying his direction, even when it seems illogical. Your obedience today will open the door to the miracle you are seeking tomorrow. Trust that God's way out is always the best way, and when you walk in obedience, you position yourself for his divine deliverance. As we bring this journey of understanding to a close, let us remember that in every seemingly impossible situation, God has already prepared a way out, a path designed for our transformation, our growth, and our ultimate victory. We are not victims of our circumstances, but purposeful creations, divinely equipped to overcome any obstacle that stands in our way. The key to unlocking the solution lies not in our strength or understanding, but in recognizing that our faith in God's infinite ability, his perfect timing, and his transformative power will carry us through. We must embrace the trials that come, knowing that they are not there to break us, but to build us, to refine us into the people we are destined to be. These challenges are opportunities for us to grow in perseverance, patience, and obedience. Through each obstacle, God is shaping us, preparing us for greater things, and deepening our reliance on his strength and wisdom. It is through our obedience trusting God's direction, even when it doesn't make sense, that we unlock the doors to our deliverance. God will not just deliver us from our challenges, He will deliver us through them, making us stronger, wiser, and more in tune with His divine plan. Our obedience activates His power and moves us from impossible to invincible. So as you stand in the face of adversity, remember this: you are not alone. God is with you, and His way out is already mapped out. Trust in His process, trust in His timing, trust in His ability. The way forward is through faith, perseverance, and obedience. And in the end, you will look back and realize that what seemed impossible at the time was nothing more than an opportunity for God's power to be revealed in your life. You are destined for greatness, and nothing at all can stand in the way of the plan God has for you. Keep moving forward in faith, for your breakthrough is closer than you think.